My son lied about cancelling dinner, then I walked in and saw the truth. My son told me he'd cancelled dinner with his friends to spend the evening with me. That was a lie, and when I found out why he'd lied, I stood in his kitchen doorway and couldn't say a single word. It started on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary Tuesday that later feels significant only because of what came after it. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of unopened mail and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour before I remembered it existed. My phone buzzed. It was Daniel. Daniel, hey Dad, still on for Friday. I cancelled plans with the guys so we could do dinner. I read it twice. Daniel was 24, living 20 minutes away in a cramped one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, working long hours at a logistics company he didn't love but hadn't figured out how to leave yet. Since his mother and I divorced 6 years earlier, dinners with Daniel had become rare, fragile things, the kind you don't dare cancel once they're on the calendar, because you're never sure when the next one will come. Me, you didn't have to do that, bud. I don't want you giving up time with your friends for me. Daniel, it's fine, I wanted to. I smiled at that. I'll admit it, I felt a small glow of pride, the kind a father feels when he thinks his son still chooses him, even now that he doesn't have to. I told myself I'd cook something good. Not takeout, not the frozen lasagna I usually ate alone in front of the television. Real food, the kind his mother used to make before everything fell apart. I didn't think anything else of it, not yet. Friday came, and with it, a strange, nagging feeling I couldn't place. It started around 4 in the afternoon, when I called Daniel to ask what time he wanted to come over. He didn't pick up. I called again 40 minutes later, straight to voicemail. I told myself he was probably still at work, or driving, or his phone had died, 100 harmless explanations, each one thinner than the last. By 6, when he still hadn't called back and dinner sat cooling on the stove, the nagging feeling had curdled into something closer to worry. I want to be honest about what kind of father I was during those years. Not a bad one, I don't think, but a distracted one. A man who worked too much when Daniel was young and tried to make up for it later with gestures that never quite closed the distance. When his mother and I split, Daniel was 18, old enough to understand, young enough to be shaped by it anyway. He'd chosen to live with her. I hadn't fought that decision, though some nights I wondered if I should have. So when he went quiet that Friday evening, old fears came rushing back in. Fears that I'd lost my window, that whatever thread still connected us was thinner than I let myself believe. At 7:15, I turned off the stove, grabbed my keys, and drove to his apartment. The drive took 18 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire way, my knuckles pale on the steering wheel, rehearsing what I'd say if I found him lying on his kitchen floor or worse. I know how that sounds, but when someone you love goes silent without explanation, your mind doesn't wander toward mundane possibilities. It runs straight for the worst ones. I parked crooked outside the laundromat, taking the stairs 2 at a time, my chest tight with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite anger, some ugly cousin of both. His apartment door was unlocked. I should have knocked, I know that now, but in the moment, all I could think about was getting inside, seeing his face, confirming he was breathing. I pushed the door open, and what I saw stopped me cold. Daniel was standing at his stove, the small, second-hand one that never quite sat level, stirring something in a pot with the intense concentration of a man performing surgery. His phone sat face down on the counter, and beside it, a spiral notebook lay open, filled with handwriting I recognized instantly because it wasn't his. It was his mother's. The apartment smelled like garlic and rosemary and something sweet baking in the oven. On the small table by the window, the one that usually held unpaid bills and a stack of unread mail, there were 2 plates set out. Not his usual mismatched dishware, but the good set, the one from the box he kept under his bed, the one that had belonged to his grandmother. He hadn't heard me come in. "Daniel," I said. He spun around so fast he nearly knocked the pot off the stove. For a moment, his face went through something complicated, surprise, then something like panic, then a kind of exhausted resignation, like a man who'd been caught holding something he wasn't ready to explain. "Dad, I thought I said 7:30. You didn't answer your phone, I got worried." He winced, actual guilt crossed his face, and for one terrible second I thought I'd stumbled onto something bad, debt, trouble, a secret he'd been hiding. My mind, still running on adrenaline, cycled through possibilities faster than I could stop it. "I'm sorry," he said. I turned it off. I didn't want anything to interrupt me while he stopped, glancing at the notebook on the counter like he'd been caught with contraband. I looked past him at the stove, at the careful arrangement on the table, at the handwriting I recognized. "Is that your mother's recipe book?" He nodded slowly, and something in his posture shifted, the guarded stance of someone deciding whether to keep a secret or finally let it go. "Sit down," he said quietly. "I need to tell you something." I sat, my heart was still hammering from the drive over, from the fear that had gripped me on those stairs, and I braced myself for whatever came next. Daniel turned off the burner, wiped his hands on a dish towel, and sat across from me at the small table, between the two plates that weren't yet filled with food. "I didn't cancel plans with my friends," he said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "There were no plans to cancel. I made that up." He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood, one he did whenever he was about to admit something he thought would disappoint me. "I've been having dinner with you every Friday for the last month because I didn't want you to know I don't really have anyone to have dinner with right now. My friends, most of them moved or got busy or just drifted. It's been kind of a lonely year, honestly. And I didn't want you feeling sorry for me, or worse, feeling like you had to fix it. So I told you I was giving something up to see you, made it sound like a sacrifice, made it easier for both of us to say yes. I didn't say anything right away. I was trying to absorb what he'd told me, that the small, prideful glow I'd felt on Tuesday, the sense that my son had chosen me over his friends, had been built on a story he'd invented to protect his own dignity. "Daniel, that's not even the real thing I need to tell you," he said, cutting me off gently, his eyes dropping to the notebook on the counter. "That's the small lie. There's a bigger one." My stomach tightened again. "Okay." He got up, retrieved the notebook, and set it in front of me. It was worn at the edges, the spiral wire bent, the cover water-stained. I recognized his mother's handwriting immediately, the looping, slightly slanted script she used to leave notes on the refrigerator with, back when we were still a family that left notes on refrigerators. "Mom gave me this before she moved to Arizona," Daniel said. "It's all her recipes. The chicken piccata you're smelling right now, the bread she used to make on Sundays, all of it. She said she wanted me to have something of hers that wasn't just memories, since memories fade and this wouldn't." I turned a few pages. There were annotations in the margins, little notes about temperature adjustments, about how much garlic was enough versus how much was Daniel's uncle's aggressive amount. It was strange and moving, holding a piece of a marriage that no longer existed, written by a woman I'd once promised forever to. "She's sick, Dad." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. I looked up from the notebook. "What?" Not dying sick, but she found out a few months ago she has early-stage Parkinson's. She didn't want to tell you directly, didn't think it was her place anymore, but she told me and she asked me not to say anything until she was ready. His voice caught slightly. "She's scared, Dad. She's scared of losing the ability to do the things she loves. Cooking is one of them. Her hands shake sometimes now, especially in the evenings. She gave me the book because she wants someone to carry it forward. She wants someone to keep making these meals the way she taught herself to make them, so they don't disappear when she can't do it anymore." I sat very still, absorbing this. My ex-wife, a woman I had once shared a life with, who I still, despite everything, cared about in the complicated way you care about someone you built a family with and then lost, was sick and scared, and hadn't told me. "And you've been cooking her recipes," I said slowly, "every Friday, for me." Daniel nodded, his eyes glassy now, though he was fighting it. "I started because I wanted to learn them before," he stopped, swallowed. "Before it's too late to ask her questions about them. But then I realized something. I wasn't just doing it for her. I was doing it because when I cook these meals and you're sitting right there, it feels like we're all still connected. Like the family didn't completely disappear, it just changed shape." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, embarrassed, the way 24-year-old men often are about their own tears. "I lied about cancelling plans because I didn't want you to know I was lonely," he continued. "And I didn't tell you about Mom because it wasn't my secret to share, and because I was scared that if I told you, you'd want to talk to her, and I didn't know if she was ready for that, and I didn't know if you were either. I've been carrying both of those things around for weeks, and tonight, when you walked in early, I didn't have it in me to keep pretending. I'm sorry you found out like this. I want to tell you I had something wise to say in that moment, some perfect fatherly response that made everything feel resolved. I didn't. What I actually did was reach across the small, uneven table and put my hand over his, the way I used to when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. "You don't have to apologize," I said, my own voice rougher than I expected. "Not for any of it. I should have just told you the truth from the start. Maybe, but you were trying to protect people you love. Me, your mother. That's not a character flaw, Daniel. That's what happens when you're the one holding a family together after it's already come apart. You take on weight that isn't yours to carry because you love the people who are struggling under it." He looked at me then, really looked at me, in a way he hadn't in a long time. Since the divorce, there had always been a careful distance between us, not hostility, just caution, like two people rebuilding a bridge board by board, testing each one before putting their full weight on it. "I'm proud of you," I told him, not because of the cooking, though it smells incredible, because of the fact that every Friday, when you had every reason to feel like your life was falling apart quietly around you, you chose to sit across from me and pretend everything was fine, just so I wouldn't worry. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength I don't know if I had at your age. Daniel let out a shaky breath, something between a laugh and a sob. "The chicken's probably overcooked now." "Then we'll eat it overcooked," I said, "together." We ate that night at the small table by the window, the two good plates finally filled, the notebook sitting open beside us like an uninvited but welcome guest. Daniel told me more about his mother, how she'd sounded on the phone, scared but trying to hide it, the way she always did. I told him I wanted to call her not to intrude, but to let her know I was there if she needed anything, no strings, no expectations, just an old friend who still cared. We talked about his job, the one he didn't love. We talked about his friends, the ones who drifted, and how loneliness sometimes creeps in quietly, disguised as busyness, until you look up one day and realize you've built a life with very few people standing inside it. I told him I understood that feeling more than he probably knew. Somewhere around 9, after the dishes were cleared and the notebook had been carefully closed and returned to its place on the shelf, Daniel said something that has stayed with me since. "I think I lied about cancelling plans because some small part of me needed you to believe I was choosing you," he said, "not out of obligation, not because I felt sorry for you being alone. I needed you to know I actually wanted to be there." "You didn't need to lie for that," I said. "I would have believed you either way." "I know that now," he said. "I just wasn't sure of it before tonight." I drove home that evening slower than I'd driven there, the panic of earlier replaced with something heavier and gentler at once, a kind of tender grief mixed with gratitude. Grief for the family we used to be, for the pain his mother was quietly carrying, for the loneliness my son had been hiding behind cheerful text messages and careful lies. And gratitude because somehow, despite everything that had broken along the way, my son still wanted to sit across a table from me every Friday and pretend, for just a couple of hours, that we were still whole. The truth I walked in on that night wasn't a scandal or a betrayal. It was something far more ordinary and far more devastating. A young man quietly holding his family together with borrowed recipes and small, protective lies, terrified of losing the last threads that connected us all. We still have dinner every Friday. Daniel doesn't lie about cancelling plans anymore. Now he just says, "See you Friday, Dad," and I say, "Wouldn't miss it," and we both understand exactly what that means. His mother and I talk now too, carefully, gently, the way two people do when they're rebuilding something that isn't quite a marriage but isn't quite nothing either. She's teaching Daniel more recipes over the phone these days, her hands steadier on good days than others. Some Fridays we put her on speaker while we cook, her voice guiding Daniel through steps she's made 1,000 times, and for a little while the three of us are in the same kitchen again, even from 3 different places. I used to think the hardest part of fatherhood was the years when they're small, the sleepless nights, the scraped knees, the tantrums in grocery store aisles. I know better now. The hardest part is watching your children become adults who quietly shoulder pain to protect you, and only discovering it by accident, by walking in 5 minutes too early on an ordinary Friday night. I'm grateful I did.